Tier 1. Alcatraz Escape, 1962. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin pulled off one of the most daring escapes in American history. The men spent months digging through their cell walls using spoons and other makeshift tools. They created a secret workshop on top of their cell block where they built a raft from raincoats. On the night of their escape, they placed clever dummy heads in their beds, made from soap, toilet paper, and real human hair from the prison barbershop. These fake heads fooled guards doing nighttime checks. The three men squeezed through the holes they'd made, climbed up plumbing pipes, and made their way to the roof. From there, they slid down the kitchen vent pipe to the ground and inflated their raft at the water's edge. They disappeared into the cold, foggy waters of San Francisco Bay and were never seen again. For decades, the FBI insisted they drowned, but no bodies were ever found. Some evidence suggests they might have survived, including a photo that supposedly shows the Anglin brothers alive in Brazil years later. The case remains officially unsolved. The mystery of whether they survived the treacherous waters makes this escape legendary. You know, I can't help but hope they made it. After all that effort, maybe they earned a break from fate. But if you think that was wild, just wait until you hear what this next guy pulled off. El Chapo's Tunnel Escape, 2015. Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman escaped from Altiplano prison through an incredibly sophisticated tunnel. Guards were shocked to find his cell empty during a routine check. The tunnel started with a hole in his shower floor, dropping down about 30 feet. From there, a mile-long passage led straight to freedom. This wasn't some crude dirt tunnel. It featured electric lighting, ventilation systems, and even a motorcycle on rails to speed his journey. Engineers had somehow mapped the exact location of his cell from outside the prison. They built the tunnel with laser precision, coming up directly beneath his shower stall, the one blind spot in the cell's surveillance cameras. The construction must have taken months and cost millions of dollars. Workers removed tons of dirt without being noticed. The tunnel even included oxygen tanks to help Guzman breathe during his escape. This dramatic breakout highlighted El Chapo's immense power and wealth. Despite being in Mexico's most secure prison, he orchestrated an engineering marvel that embarrassed authorities worldwide. He was recaptured in 2016 and later extradited to the United States. Believe it or not, the next escape makes that one look like child's play. The Great Escape, 1944. During World War II, Allied prisoners at Stalag Luft III, a German POW camp, executed an ambitious plan to free hundreds of captives. Led by Royal Air Force Squadron leader Roger Bushell, the prisoners dug 3 tunnels nicknamed Tom, Dick, and Harry. The tunnels were engineering marvels. The men created air pumps from spare parts, shored up walls with bedboards, and built trolleys to move dirt. They disposed of tons of soil by carrying it in small bags hidden in their pants, then discreetly releasing it on the prison grounds. On March 24, 1944, 76 men escaped through the Harry Tunnel before guards discovered the breakout. The tunnel had come up short of the forest's edge, exposing the men in the open. The escape threw Nazi Germany into chaos as they launched a massive manhunt. Unfortunately, only 3 men made it to freedom. The Germans recaptured 73 prisoners and, under Hitler's direct orders, executed 50 of them as a warning. Despite the tragic outcome, the escape boosted Allied morale and tied up German resources. The story later became the basis for the classic 1963 film, The Great Escape, starring Steve McQueen, though Hollywood took many creative liberties with the true story. Ted Bundy's Colorado Escape, 1977. Serial killer Ted Bundy managed 2 escapes while awaiting trial in Colorado. Yes, you heard that right. Not only was he a prolific murderer, he's also escaped prison multiple times. It's unsettling how someone can be that capable but use it in all the worst ways. His first escape came during a preliminary hearing at a courthouse in Aspen. Because he was representing himself, Bundy was allowed to use the courthouse law library without handcuffs. During a break, with no guards watching, Bundy simply opened a window and jumped out. Though he sprained his ankle in the process, he disappeared into the mountains surrounding Aspen. He survived for 6 days in the wilderness before police caught him driving a stolen car. Back in jail, Bundy planned more carefully. He lost 35 pounds to fit through a small light fixture opening in the ceiling of his cell. He found that guards rarely checked his cell when he had his radio playing. On December 30th, 1977, while most staff were on Christmas break, Bundy climbed through the light fixture hole and crawled through the ceiling crawl space. He emerged in a guard's apartment that was empty and simply walked out. This time, Bundy made it to Florida before being captured again. During his time on the run, he committed several more murders. His escape showed his intelligence and charm made him particularly dangerous, and how the system repeatedly underestimated him. Just goes to show, you should never underestimate someone like this. And believe it or not, the next escape is even more unbelievable. Pascal Payet. French criminal Pascal Payet took prison escapes to new heights, literally. He became famous for using helicopters in not just one, but 3 separate prison breaks. In 2001, Payet escaped from Luyen prison when accomplices hijacked a helicopter and forced the pilot to land in the prison exercise yard. The dramatic daylight escape took just a few minutes as Payet climbed aboard and flew away. 2 years later, while still on the run, Payet organized another helicopter escape for 3 inmates at the same prison, seemingly just to prove he could do it. Authorities eventually recaptured Payet and sent him to a high-security facility, moving him regularly between prisons to prevent escape attempts. These precautions failed. In 2007, 4 masked men hijacked another helicopter and forced the pilot to land on the roof of Grasse prison. Within minutes, they collected Payet and disappeared into the night sky, abandoning the helicopter about 30 miles away. French police launched an international manhunt, finally capturing Payet in Spain 2 months later. After these embarrassing incidents, French prisons installed anti-helicopter nets over exercise yards. Payet's escapes earned him a place in criminal history as the helicopter escape king, proving that sometimes the most direct escape route is straight up. If you're still with me, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. Things are about to get even more interesting. Tier 2. Richard Lee McNair. Richard Lee McNair pulled off one of the most creative prison breaks in history when he literally mailed himself to freedom. While working in the prison repair shop at the U.S. Penitentiary in Pollock, Louisiana, McNair carefully crafted an escape plan that sounds like something from a movie. McNair constructed a special hiding space beneath mail bags on a pallet in the prison's warehouse. He packed lip balm, a breathing tube, and even baby powder to prevent tracking dogs from picking up his scent. On April 5, 2006, workers unknowingly loaded McNair's pallet onto a mail truck, which drove him right out of the prison gates. Once clear of the prison, McNair emerged from his hiding spot and escaped. But what made his story truly remarkable happened just hours later. A police officer stopped McNair, who was jogging along a railroad track. The entire conversation was captured on the officer's dashboard camera. Without identification, McNair calmly claimed to be a Robert Jones who was just out for a run. He chatted confidently with the officer about construction work in the area and even joked about looking like the escaped prisoner. The officer, completely fooled by McNair's relaxed demeanor, let him go with a friendly warning to carry ID next time. McNair remained free for an impressive 18 months before being captured in Canada. His mailbag escape and his cool-headed conversation with police have made him a legend among prison escapes. Just when you think you've heard everything, a story like this comes along and changes the game. El Chapo's laundry cart escape, 2001. Before his famous tunnel escape in 2015, Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman made his first dramatic prison break in 2001. I guess there's a reason he ended up as a cartel leader. This kind of boldness is just on another level. This earlier escape showed both his creativity and the immense corruption he could buy with his drug wealth. El Chapo was being held in Puente Grande, Mexico's high-security prison, officially called the Federal Social Rehabilitation Center No. 2. The prison was supposed to be escape-proof, but money and influence proved more powerful than steel bars. According to the official story, El Chapo hid in a laundry cart that was being taken out of the prison. A maintenance worker pushed the cart through multiple security checkpoints, past guards who had been bribed to look the other way or actively help. The cart was then loaded into a trunk and driven away. However, many investigators doubt this simple explanation. They believe high-ranking officials actually unlocked doors and escorted El Chapo out while the laundry cart story was created as a cover. Over 70 prison employees, including the warden, were eventually charged with helping in the escape. After his escape, El Chapo rebuilt his Sinaloa drug empire, becoming one of the world's most wanted fugitives. He evaded capture for 13 years, moving between hidden locations in Mexico's mountains and maintaining a network of tunnels, safe houses, and loyal followers. This first escape cemented El Chapo's reputation for extraordinary resourcefulness and his ability to corrupt entire institutions. John Dillinger's Bluff, 1934. Depression-era bank robber John Dillinger pulled off one of history's most audacious prison escapes armed with nothing but a fake gun. While being held at the escape-proof Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana, Dillinger carved an incredibly realistic-looking pistol. There are conflicting stories about how exactly he made the gun. Some accounts claim he whittled it from a wooden washboard using a razor blade. Others say he used soap or shoe polish to blacken the wooden gun. Whatever the materials, the result looked real enough to fool his jailers. On March 3, 1934, Dillinger pulled out his fake weapon and forced guards to open a cell. He then gathered several other prisoners and locked up 33 jail officers and guards. To add insult to injury, he stole the sheriff's new Ford V8 for his getaway car. What made this escape even more embarrassing for authorities was that Dillinger had been sent to this specific jail because it was considered the most secure in the area. The sheriff had even boasted to reporters that Dillinger would never escape from his facility. The escape humiliated the FBI and made Dillinger a folk hero to many Americans who resented banks during the Great Depression. The wooden gun escape became a central part of Dillinger's legend, showing his daringness and quick thinking. Adding legal troubles to embarrassment, Dillinger's escape across state lines in a stolen car violated the Federal Motor Vehicle Theft Act, allowing the FBI to join the manhunt. He was eventually shot and killed outside Chicago's Biograph Theater 4 months later. Up next, you'll hear just how far some will go when driven by love. Michel Vaujour and his wife, 1986. Michel Vaujour's prison break reads like a love story mixed with an action movie. The French armed robber was serving a long sentence in Paris's La Santé prison when he executed one of history's most romantic escapes, made possible by his devoted wife, Nadine. When Vaujour learned he would be allowed regular exercise on the prison roof, he saw an opportunity, but he needed help from the outside, and that's where his wife came in. In an extraordinary act of dedication, Nadine Vaujour spent months taking helicopter flying lessons, preparing to rescue her husband. On May 26, 1986, Michel made his way to the prison roof as usual. He had colored his prison clothes to look like a guard from a distance and created fake guns from cardboard and paint. Meanwhile, Nadine approached in a rented helicopter, hovering just above the prison roof. Guards watched in disbelief as Michel climbed aboard the helicopter and flew away with his wife at the controls. The couple landed at a nearby football field where a car was waiting and they disappeared. Their freedom was short-lived. Michel was shot and partially paralyzed during a failed bank robbery attempt just months later. Nadine was eventually arrested and served a 4-year sentence for her role in the escape. Despite its unhappy ending, the Vaujour's helicopter escape remains one of the most dramatic and romantic prison breaks in history, a testament to how far some people will go for love. This next part? Let's just say it goes in a direction you won't expect. Yoshie Shiratori, 1930s to 40s. Yoshie Shiratori earned the nickname the Houdini of Japan after escaping from prison not once but 4 times between the 1930s and 1940s. 4 times is wild. No wonder he became a folk legend in Japan. Shiratori's first escape came from Aomori prison in 1936. Using a wire he had hidden, he picked the lock on his handcuffs and cell door during a rainstorm when the guards were less attentive. He then climbed the fence and disappeared into the night. After being recaptured, Shiratori was sent to Akita prison, supposedly more secure than Aomori. Undeterred, he studied the cement floor of his cell and noticed it softened when wet. Over many months, he used miso soup to slowly corrode the concrete, creating a hole through which he escaped in 1942. His third breakout occurred at Abashiri prison, known as Japan's Alcatraz. During winter, Shiratori discovered he could use his body heat to partially melt the water that froze between the cell's iron bars. Working tirelessly in freezing temperatures, he widened the gap enough to squeeze through and scaled the prison wall. Shiratori's final escape from Sapporo prison in 1947 was perhaps his most impressive. He noticed the air vent in his cell was held by rusted screws. Dislocating his shoulder, he squeezed through the small opening and climbed down the prison wall using nothing but his fingers and toes. What makes Shiratori's story even more remarkable is that his final escape led to his vindication. While free, he convinced the judge to review his original conviction, which was eventually overturned. Shiratori's persistence and ingenuity made him a legend in Japanese criminal history. Tier 3. Clarence Anglin. The 1962 Alcatraz escape remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. While official reports claim Clarence Anglin, his brother John, and Frank Morris drowned in the cold San Francisco Bay, evidence suggests they might have made it to freedom. The strongest support for this theory came on Christmas 1962, when the Anglin family reportedly received a card by both brothers. Over the years, more cards arrived on birthdays and other special occasions. The family kept these communications secret for decades, fearing it would trigger a renewed manhunt. In 1975, a mysterious stranger approached the Anglin's mother at her son Alfred's funeral. Family members claimed this tall, tanned man was Clarence, who briefly spoke with his mother before disappearing back into the crowd. The Brazil connection emerged most dramatically in 2013 when the History Channel documentary, Alcatraz: Search for the Truth, revealed a photo allegedly showing John and Clarence Anglin in Brazil in 1975. The image shows 2 men on a small farm with facial features remarkably similar to the escaped brothers. Forensic experts analyzing the photo concluded it could indeed be them. Further supporting the Brazil theory, investigators discovered the Anglins had studied Spanish before their escape and had connections to people in South America. Family members claimed the brothers worked on a coffee farm and later owned a small business. The FBI officially closed the case in 1979, but in 2018, they received a letter supposedly written by John Anglin claiming he was 83 years old, had cancer, and lived in California, adding yet another twist to this enduring mystery. The next one I have for you is basically an action film, Carlos Ghosn. Carlos Ghosn's escape from Japan reads like a Hollywood thriller. Once one of the world's most powerful auto executives as chairman of Nissan, Renault, Mitsubishi, Ghosn faced financial misconduct charges in Japan that could have meant years in prison. Under strict house arrest in Tokyo and constantly monitored, Ghosn seemed trapped in Japan's justice system. But on December 29, 2019, the 65-year-old executive simply vanished. What happened next emerged in breathtaking detail. Ghosn had hired a team of private security contractors, including former Special Forces operators. They arrived in Japan posing as musicians for a private Christmas concert at Ghosn's residence. After the performance, Ghosn hid inside one of the large equipment cases, specifically a box designed for audio equipment, or possibly a double bass. The box had holes drilled in the bottom to allow him to breathe. The team then transported Ghosn to a private jet waiting at Kansai International Airport. Japanese airport security never inspected the oversized box, assuming it was just musical equipment. The private jet flew first to Turkey and then to Lebanon, which had no extradition treaty with Japan and where Ghosn holds citizenship. By the time Japanese authorities realized he was gone, Ghosn was hosting a press conference in Beirut, claiming he fled because he couldn't get a fair trial in Japan. The daring escape embarrassed Japanese authorities and spawned books, documentaries, and a planned movie. Several people who helped him were arrested, including 2 American security contractors who received prison sentences in Japan, while Ghosn remains free in Lebanon. If you're finding this interesting so far, it only gets better from here. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe before we keep going. The Texas 7, 2000. On December 13th, 2000, 7 dangerous inmates pulled off the largest prison break in Texas history. The men, George Rivas, Donald Newbury, Joseph Garcia, Randy Halprin, Patrick Murphy, Larry Harper, and Michael Rodriguez were serving long sentences for violent crimes at the maximum security Connolly unit near Kennedy, Texas. Their escape began with careful planning and precise timing. They overpowered civilian workers and guards in the maintenance area. They stole clothes, keys, and ID cards, then called the guard tower claiming maintenance work needed to be done there. When an officer came down to investigate, they took him hostage too. Using their disguises and stolen prison truck, all 7 drove straight through the prison gates. By the time the alarm was raised, they had a 2-hour head start. The group fled to Houston, where they robbed a sporting goods store. When police officer Aubrey Hawkins responded to the robbery, they shot him 11 times, killing him. This murder turned a prison break into one of the biggest manhunts in Texas history. The fugitives traveled to Colorado, posing as Christian missionaries. Their mistake came when they appeared on America's Most Wanted. A viewer recognized them staying at an RV park in Woodland Park, Colorado. When authorities closed in on January 21, 2001, Larry Harper committed suicide. The other 6 surrendered and were returned to Texas. 6 received death sentences for Officer Hawkins' murder, though 2 were later reduced to life sentences. 4 have been executed so far, while 2 remain on death row. But that's nothing compared to what's coming next. Leonard Peltier, 1975. Leonard Peltier's story combines prison escape with controversial politics and claims of injustice. A Native American activist with the American Indian Movement, AIM, Peltier was convicted of killing 2 FBI agents during a 1975 shootout on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. The shootout occurred during a period of extreme tension on the reservation, with violence between traditional tribal members and supporters of the tribal chairman. On June 26, 1975, 2 FBI agents, Jack Kohler and Ronald Williams, entered the reservation pursuing a robbery suspect. What happened next remains disputed, but a firefight erupted that left both agents and 1 Native American dead. Peltier fled to Canada but was arrested, extradited to the US, and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Many supporters believe his trial was deeply flawed, with witnesses allegedly coerced and evidence manipulated. In July 1979, Peltier and 2 other inmates attempted to escape from Lompoc Federal Penitentiary in California. They cut through the prison fence and made a brief run for freedom. During the escape, a shot was fired, though no one was injured. The 3 were quickly recaptured. This escape attempt added 7 years to Peltier's already lengthy sentence. It also complicated his case, as some supporters felt it hurt his claims of innocence. Peltier has now spent over 45 years in prison. His case remains one of the most controversial in American criminal justice, with human rights organizations, religious leaders, and celebrities calling for his release. For many Native Americans, Peltier symbolizes centuries of injustice against indigenous peoples. And if you think that was risky, the next plan will blow your mind. Libby prison escape, 1864. In the midst of the American Civil War, 109 Union soldiers pulled off what became known as the most remarkable prison escape of the war. Libby Prison in Richmond, Virginia, housed captured Union officers in harsh conditions. Food was scarce, disease was rampant, and prisoners were packed into overcrowded rooms of a converted tobacco warehouse. The escape plan began in January 1864, led by Colonel Thomas E. Rose of Pennsylvania. Rose discovered an unused basement area beneath the prison kitchen, accessible through a fireplace in the prisoners' quarters. He assembled a team of diggers who worked in shifts using stolen tools and their bare hands. The men faced incredible challenges. They had to hide all traces of digging, dispose of dirt by spreading it across the prison yard during exercise periods, and work in complete darkness to avoid guards. The biggest obstacle was digging under Carey Street, which ran alongside the prison. The tunnel had to be long enough to emerge beyond the sentry's view. After 17 days of digging, the tunnel was complete, stretching about 60 feet from the prison to a vacant lot. On February 9, 1864, prisoners began crawling through the narrow passage. The escape started at 8:15 p.m. and continued until discovery around 2 a.m. Of the 109 who escaped, 59 successfully reached Union lines, 48 were recaptured, and 2 drowned in the nearby James River. The successful escapees had to travel through freezing winter conditions, avoid Confederate patrols, and find their way through unfamiliar territory. The Libby prison escape boosted Northern morale and embarrassed the Confederacy. It remains one of the most successful mass prison breaks in American history. Next up is a story so insane it sounds made up, but it's 100% real. Sarah Jo Pender, 2008. Sarah Jo Pender turned a guard's attraction into her ticket to freedom from Indiana's Rockville Correctional Facility. Sentenced to 110 years for her role in a double murder, Pender was determined not to spend her life behind bars. Scott Spittler, a 28-year-old prison guard, fell hard for the charismatic inmate. Their relationship quickly crossed professional boundaries, with Spittler smuggling in a cell phone that Pender used to coordinate her escape plan. On August 4, 2008, Spittler's infatuation led him to make a career-ending decision. He helped Pender slip into the prisoner's visitor area without proper authorization. From there, she walked straight out of the front door with departing visitors and climbed into a waiting car driven by her former cellmate's brother. When prison officials conducted the evening count, they discovered Pender missing. Investigators quickly identified Spittler as her accomplice after finding text messages between them. He eventually confessed to helping her escape and received an 8-year sentence for his role. Meanwhile, Pender vanished into thin air. Her case gained national attention when she was featured on America's Most Wanted and earned a spot on the U.S. Marshal's 15 Most Wanted Fugitives list. Tipsters reported seeing her in various states, but she remained elusive. For 136 days, Pender lived under a fake identity in Chicago, working as a bartender. Her freedom ended when authorities received a tip about her whereabouts. U.S. Marshals arrested her at her apartment on December 22, 2008. Pender received an additional 30 years for her escape. Her story became the subject of numerous true crime shows, highlighting how manipulation and charm can sometimes overcome even the strictest security measures. Frank Abagnale, 1971. Frank Abagnale Jr., whose life inspired the movie Catch Me If You Can, pulled off one of history's most audacious prison escapes by using his greatest skill, impersonation. After years of successful cons posing as an airline pilot, doctor, and lawyer, Abagnale was finally captured in 1969 and sent to the Federal Detention Center in Atlanta, Georgia. While awaiting trial, he immediately began planning his escape. Abagnale somehow managed regular phone calls with an accomplice posing as a federal agent. During these calls, Abagnale stood near prison guards, boldly discussing undercover operations at the facility. Over time, guards overheard enough conversations to believe Abagnale was actually an undercover inspector. His brilliant scheme came together when his friend visited wearing a suit and FBI-style credentials. Abagnale convinced the guards that he and his colleague needed to step outside for a confidential meeting about security issues at the prison. Remarkably, the guards allowed them to walk right out the front door. Once free, Abagnale resumed his life of fraud until being recaptured months later. When questioned about his escape, he supposedly said, "I didn't escape from prison, I just walked out." The truth behind this famous escape has been debated. In later interviews, Abagnale downplayed some elements of this story. federal records suggest his actual escape may have been less dramatic, possibly involving a simple climb over a fence or through a window. However, given Abagnale's lifelong talent for deception and storytelling, separating facts from fiction remains challenging. What's undeniable is that Abagnale eventually turned his life around, becoming a respected security consultant who helped the FBI catch other fraudsters. Texas Cartel Escape, 2019. In March 2019, Mexican authorities were stunned to discover an elaborate underground tunnel at the Ciudad Victoria prison in Tamaulipas, Mexico. The tunnel allowed Hector Adrian El Contador Lucio Benavides, a high-ranking member of the Gulf Cartel, to simply vanish from his cell. Guards doing their morning count found Benavides missing from his cell in the prison's special section for dangerous inmates. A search revealed a perfectly concealed entrance to a tunnel underneath his toilet, a classic prison escape method that nevertheless requires significant resources and help. The tunnel stretched approximately 15 feet down and then extended horizontally about 120 feet beyond the prison walls. The passageway was professionally constructed with reinforced walls, electric lighting, and even a ventilation system. Such sophisticated engineering couldn't have been completed without substantial help from both inside and outside the prison. At the tunnel's exit, investigators found a toolbox containing a sledgehammer and shovel, along with discarded prison clothes. Benavides had clearly changed into civilian clothes before disappearing into the surrounding area. What made this particularly embarrassing for Mexican authorities was that Benavides had been transferred to Ciudad Victoria prison just months earlier, specifically because it was considered more secure than his previous facility. The speed with which the tunnel was constructed after his arrival suggested extreme corruption among prison staff. Mexican federal forces launched a massive manhunt across Tamaulipas state, but Benavides seemed to vanish completely. Multiple prison officials were arrested on suspicion of assisting with the escape. This tunnel escape highlighted the ongoing challenges Mexico faces with prison security and the immense power drug cartels wield, even behind bars. Now let's come back to the US, where most of the action seems to be. Russell Maroon Shotes, 1977 and 1980. Russell Maroon Shotes earned his nickname from his multiple prison escapes. A former member of the Black Liberation Army and the Black Panthers, Shotes was serving a life sentence for the 1970 murder of a Philadelphia police officer when he made his first escape. On September 15, 1977, Shotes and 3 other inmates escaped from Pennsylvania's Huntington State Prison. They used a smuggled wire cutter to slice through a fence during exercise time. While 2 of his fellow escapees were quickly recaptured, Shotes remained free for a month before being caught. Back in custody, Shotes was transferred to the maximum security Fairview State Hospital for the criminally insane. Authorities believed this facility would better contain him, but they underestimated his determination. In March 1980, Shotes escaped again. This time, he had smuggled a hacksaw blade and painstakingly cut through the bars of his cell window. He fashioned a rope from bedsheets and climbed down the prison wall. After leaving the prison grounds, he raided a nearby home for supplies, tying up the owners but leaving them unharmed. For 3 days, Shotes evaded a massive manhunt that included hundreds of police officers, bloodhounds, and helicopters combing the rural Pennsylvania countryside. He was finally captured while attempting to flag down a taxi. After his second escape, prison officials placed Shotes in solitary confinement, where he remained for nearly 30 years, one of the longest solitary confinement terms in American history. Human rights organizations protested his treatment, and he was finally released into the general prison population in 2014. Shotes died in prison in December 2021 at age 78. His nickname, Maroon, referring to escaped slaves who formed independent communities, reflected both his escapes and his political identity as a freedom fighter. We've got more interesting stuff ahead, so feel free to stick around and subscribe. Boy in the Suitcase Escape, 2011. Juan Ramirez Tiarina's escape from a Mexican prison gives new meaning to thinking outside the box. The inmate managed to fold his 5'8" frame into a suitcase and almost made it to freedom, creating one of the most unusual prison break attempts in recent history. Tiarina was serving a 20-year sentence for illegal weapons possession at the Chetumal prison in Mexico's southern Quintana Roo state. Like many Mexican prisons, Chetumal allowed conjugal visits, giving inmates private time with their partners in special rooms within the prison. On July 2, 2011, Tiarina's wife, Maria del Carmen Arjona Rivero, arrived for a scheduled conjugal visit, bringing with her a large rolling suitcase. After their private time together, guards noticed something strange about Arjona as she prepared to leave. She seemed nervous and had difficulty handling the now bulky suitcase. When security staff opened the suitcase for inspection, they found Tiarina curled up inside, packed in like a contortionist. He had somehow managed to zip himself into the bag, likely with his wife's help, hoping to be wheeled right out of prison. Photos of Tiarina crammed into the case went viral worldwide, showing him folded into a fetal position with his head between his knees. Authorities arrested Arjona for her role in the escape plot, and Tiarina faced additional charges. The incident led to increased security measures for conjugal visits at the facility, including more thorough inspections of all items brought in and out by visitors. While unsuccessful, the suitcase escape joined the ranks of creative prison break attempts and reminded officials that inmates with nothing but time can develop surprisingly inventive escape plans. Tier 4. Stefana Breitwieser, 2001. Stefana Breitwieser gained notoriety as one of history's most prolific art thieves, stealing over 200 priceless works from museums across Europe. While his art heists were meticulously planned, it was his dramatic prison escape, courtesy of his devoted girlfriend Anne Catherine Kleinklaus, that reads like a Hollywood script. In January 2001, Breitwieser was being transferred between detention facilities in Switzerland when Kleinklaus staged a daring rescue. As the prison van traveled along a rural road, Kleinklaus suddenly pulled her car in front of it, forcing it to stop. What happened next stunned the guards. Kleinklaus emerged from her vehicle armed with a pistol. She fired warning shots into the air, causing enough confusion for Breitwieser to break free from his restraints. In the chaos, he managed to escape the van and jump into Kleinklaus's waiting car. The couple sped away, with police in hot pursuit. A high-speed chase ensued through the Swiss countryside, with Kleinklaus reportedly reaching speeds over 100 miles per hour. They eventually lost their pursuers by abandoning their car and fleeing into a dense forest. Their freedom lasted barely 2 weeks. Authorities tracked them to a small hotel where they had been hiding. Both were arrested without further incident, ending their brief but dramatic time on the run. The escape attempt added significant time to both their sentences. Breitwieser eventually served 4 years for his art thefts, while Kleinklaus received 3 years for her role in both the thefts and the escape. After his release, Breitwieser wrote a memoir about his crimes, but claimed to have reformed. His spectacular jailbreak remains one of the most romantic, if ill-advised, prison escapes in recent European history. Rafael Reséndez Ramirez, 1999. Rafael Reséndez Ramirez, known as the Railroad Killer, benefited from one of the most catastrophic law enforcement blunders in American history. In a mistake that would cost several more lives, US authorities literally opened the jailhouse door for a known serial killer. Reséndez Ramirez was a Mexican drifter who rode freight trains across the United States, breaking into homes near railroad tracks to rob and murder the occupants. Between 1997 and 1999, he killed at least 15 people in multiple states, using rocks, pickaxes, and other tools as weapons. In June 1999, Reséndez Ramirez was briefly detained in Houston for illegally entering the US. Although he used the alias Rafael Reséndez, his fingerprints matched those of a man wanted for questioning in several brutal murders. Incredibly, instead of holding him for investigation, Immigration and Naturalization Service (INS) officials deported him to Mexico on June 1st. Within days of his release, Reséndez Ramirez snuck back across the border and killed 4 more people: Josephine Convica, 73, in Texas; George Morber, 80, and Carolyn Frederick, 52, in Illinois; and Noemi Dominguez, 26, in Texas. The public was outraged when they learned these deaths could have been prevented. The FBI added Reséndez Ramirez to their 10 most wanted list and launched a massive manhunt. Finally, on July 13, 1999, he surrendered to authorities at a border crossing, with his sister acting as an intermediary. Reséndez Ramirez was sentenced to death in Texas and executed by lethal injection in 2006. The deadly administrative error led to significant reforms in how law enforcement agencies share information about suspects across jurisdictions and highlighted the dangerous gaps in immigration enforcement systems. Gordillo Brothers, 1990s. Colombia's notorious Gordillo brothers turned their prison sentences into little more than inconvenient hotel stays through a shocking arrangement that exposed the extraordinary corruption in Colombia's prison system during the height of the drug wars. Gilberto and Miguel Gordillo, mid-level cocaine traffickers associated with the Norte Valle cartel, were arrested in 1994 and sent to La Modelo prison in Bogota. While this maximum security facility looked imposing from the outside, the brothers quickly discovered that nearly everything inside had a price. Rather than plotting a dramatic escape, the Gordillos negotiated a bizarre arrangement with corrupt prison officials. For approximately $5,000 per month in bribes, guards allowed the brothers to leave the prison every evening around 8 p.m. They would return by 5 a.m. the next morning just in time for morning count. During their nightly releases, the Gordillos lived normal lives, attending family functions, running their continuing drug operations, dining at expensive restaurants, and even going to nightclubs. Prison guards would hold their cells and ensure no surprise inspections occurred while they were absent. This arrangement continued for nearly 3 years until a surprise raid by anti-corruption police caught the brothers outside the prison. The subsequent investigation revealed dozens of prisoners had similar arrangements, with prices varying based on the inmates' wealth and connections. Several prison guards and administrators were arrested and charged with corruption. The scandal forced Colombia's government to implement significant prison reforms, though critics argue these changes merely drove corruption deeper underground rather than eliminating it. The Gordillo case became emblematic of Colombia's struggles with corruption during the drug war era, showing how wealth could turn even a maximum security sentence into a minor inconvenience. Now, let's discuss a place that's known to be shrouded in secrecy: North Korea. North Korean political prisoner escape, 2010. Shin Dong-hyuk's escape from North Korea's notorious Camp 14 stands as one of the most harrowing prison breaks in modern history. Born inside this brutal political prison in 1982, Shin knew nothing of the outside world until his daring escape at age 23. Camp 14, one of North Korea's harshest labor camps, imprisons people considered enemies of the state. Many inmates are there because of guilt by association, punished for the supposed crimes of their relatives. Born to imprisoned parents, Shin grew up knowing only starvation, torture, and forced labor. He never learned concepts like love or trust. In January 2005, Shin and another prisoner named Park were assigned to work on a mountain near the camp's electrified fence. They secretly planned an escape, knowing failure meant certain execution. As guards momentarily looked away, both men made a desperate run for the fence. Park reached the fence first and attempted to squeeze through, but was immediately electrocuted. His body slumped over the wires, creating a brief gap in the current. Shin scrambled over his dead friend's body, suffering severe burns but making it through the fence. For weeks, Shin wandered through North Korea, surviving by stealing foods and clothes from isolated homes. He had no concept of money, maps, or the outside world. Eventually, he bribed border guards with stolen food and crossed into China. After months hiding in China and working exploitative jobs, Shin found help from South Korean journalists who helped him reach South Korea in 2006. He later moved to the United States and became one of the first people born in a North Korean camp to escape and tell their story. Shin's memoir, Escape from Camp 14, exposed North Korea's brutal prison system to the world. His body still bears the scars from the electric fence, permanent reminders of his extraordinary escape from one of Earth's most terrible prisons. Billy Hayes, 1975. Billy Hayes' escape from a Turkish prison became world famous through the movie Midnight Express, but the Hollywood version sanitized what was actually a much darker and more complex story. In 1970, the 23-year-old American college student was arrested at Istanbul airport trying to smuggle 4 pounds of hashish back to the United States. Initially sentenced to 4 years, Hayes was devastated when, just 54 days before his scheduled release, a Turkish court increased his sentence to life in prison. The real escape was nothing like the movie's dramatic ending. After 5 brutal years in various Turkish prisons, Hayes was transferred to İmralı Island Prison in the Sea of Marmara. This isolated facility was considered escape-proof since it sat on an island miles from shore. One stormy night in October 1975, Hayes noticed the prison security seemed lighter than usual. After breaking into the prison supply building, he stole a dinghy used by prison guards. With no compass and only basic swimming skills, Hayes rowed through darkness and rough waters toward what he hoped was the mainland. After several terrifying hours at sea, Hayes reached shore and began a desperate journey across Turkey. He dyed his blonde hair black and posed as a tourist. He bribed officials at checkpoints, survived on little food, and eventually crossed into Greece. From there, he made his way to Frankfurt, Germany, and finally home to America. The Midnight Express film portrayed Turks as uniformly brutal and sadistic, causing diplomatic tensions between Turkey and the US years later. Hayes returned to Turkey to apologize for how the film demonized the country and its people, while maintaining that the prison conditions were indeed horrific. What are your thoughts on these prison escapes so far? Let me know in the comments before we get into some even crazier escape stories. Pavle Pavlovich, 2005. Pavle Pavlovich gained notoriety in 2005 for what may be one of the most physically painful prison escapes ever attempted. The Serbian inmate allegedly used nothing but his teeth to chew his way out of Belgrade Central Prison. Pavlovich, serving time for armed robbery, had unusually strong teeth thanks to metal dental work he'd received years earlier. According to prison authorities, he methodically worked on the steel bars of his cell window for months, focusing his efforts during night shifts when fewer guards were on duty. Each night, Pavlovich would reportedly wrap a cloth around a bar to muffle the sound and then gnaw at the same spot for hours. The metal fillings in his teeth gave him just enough hardness to slowly wear away at the steel. Guards never suspected anything because he cleverly hid the damage with a mixture of soap and dirt that matched the color of the bars. After nearly 3 months of this painful effort, Pavlovich had weakened the bars enough to bend them slightly apart. One night, he finally squeezed his thin frame through the gap, dropped to the ground below, and scaled the outer prison wall. His freedom lasted only 4 days before police recaptured him at a relative's home about 60 miles from Belgrade. When officers examined his cell, they were astonished to find teeth marks on the bars. A dental examination confirmed severe damage to Pavlovich's teeth and gums from his extraordinary escape method. Though some experts questioned whether it's physically possible to chew through steel bars, prison officials insisted this was exactly what happened. Whether completely true or somewhat exaggerated, Pavlovich's story demonstrates the extreme measures some prisoners will take to gain freedom. Brazil's Prison Escape Festival, 2017. In January 2017, Brazil was rocked by what local media dubbed a Prison Escape Festival, a series of coordinated jailbreaks that exposed the country's crumbling prison system and the powerful reach of drug cartels. The most dramatic escape occurred at the Ramiro Gonçalves Abrantes prison in the northeastern state of Paraíba. In what appeared to be a carefully orchestrated plan, heavily armed men in police uniforms arrived at the prison in the early morning hours. These fake officers claimed they were there to transfer several inmates to another facility. Prison staff, supposedly fooled by the uniforms, allowed the armed men inside. Once through the gates, the men revealed themselves as cartel members and began setting off explosives that blew holes in the prison's concrete walls. In the resulting chaos, 92 inmates fled through the breaches. Investigations later revealed a darker truth. Many guards hadn't been fooled at all. They had been bribed to cooperate with the escape plan. Some deliberately looked the other way, while others actively helped by providing information about security protocols and blind spots in surveillance. The Paraíba escape was just one of several that week. Similar coordinated breakouts occurred in prisons across Brazil, with over 200 inmates escaping nationwide. Most were members of powerful drug gangs like the 1st Capital Command, PCC, and Red Command that effectively controlled many prisons from the inside. Brazilian authorities recaptured about half of the escaped prisoners in the following months. Several prison officials were arrested for corruption and complicity in the escapes. The incident highlighted Brazil's ongoing struggle with prison overcrowding, corruption, and the influence of organized crime within the corrections system. If you thought that was chaotic, just wait, there's more. Escape from Dannemora, 2015. The prison escape from Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York, captivated America in the summer of 2015. Two convicted murderers, Richard Matt and David Sweat, engineered an escape so elaborate it seemed straight from a Hollywood script. The key to their plan was Joyce Mitchell, a prison employee who supervised the tailor shop where both men worked. Over months, Matt and Sweat manipulated Mitchell, with Matt using his artistic talents to paint portraits for her and both men flattering her constantly. Their psychological manipulation worked. Mitchell fell in love with both inmates and began smuggling tools into the prison inside frozen hamburger meat. Using these tools, hacksaw blades, chisels, and drill bits, Matt and Sweat cut through the steel back walls of their cells. Night after night, they would slip out, explore the prison's maze of tunnels and pipes, and return before morning count. They meticulously planned their route, eventually finding a steam pipe that led toward the prison's outer walls. On June 5, 2005, they made their final move, cutting through the steam pipe and emerging from a manhole outside the prison walls. Mitchell was supposed to pick them up as their getaway driver, but she panicked and checked herself into a hospital instead, claiming chest pains. Without transportation, the men fled on foot into the dense Adirondack forests. A massive manhunt followed, involving over 1,300 law enforcement officers and costing nearly $23 million. After 22 days on the run, officers shot and killed Richard Matt when he refused to surrender. 2 days later, a state trooper spotted David Sweat jogging along a road and shot him twice when he tried to flee. Sweat survived and was returned to prison with additional charges. Joyce Mitchell received a sentence of up to 7 years for her role in the escape. The entire case later became a critically acclaimed TV miniseries called Escape at Dannemora. If you're still watching, you're officially part of the Deep Dive crew. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, 1980s. Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, better known as Carlos the Jackal, was one of the world's most notorious terrorists in the 1970s and 1980s. During his imprisonment in France, he reportedly made several escape attempts that governments kept secret from the public to avoid diplomatic embarrassment. Carlos, a Venezuelan-born Marxist, was responsible for numerous bombings, assassinations, and hijackings across Europe and the Middle East. After years of evading capture, French special forces finally arrested him in Sudan in 1994 and brought him to France to face multiple life sentences. His most significant escape attempt allegedly occurred in 1998 at La Santé prison in Paris. According to sources who later came forward, Carlos had meticulously planned an escape involving both inside help and an external team of former operatives. The plan reportedly included corrupted guards who would help him reach a service entrance where armed accomplices would be waiting with fake identification documents and transportation. French intelligence apparently received the tip just days before the attempt was scheduled. Rather than announcing the plot, authorities quietly transferred Carlos to a different facility and increased security around him. The public remained unaware of how close the infamous terrorist had come to freedom. Why keep it a secret? The Cold War context provides clues. Carlos had worked with Soviet bloc intelligence agencies, Palestinian groups, and other governments. A public admission of his near escape might have exposed international connections that various governments preferred to keep hidden. There were also concerns that publicizing the attempt might inspire his remaining supporters to try again. Carlos remains in prison today, serving multiple life sentences. Now in his 70s, he has apparently abandoned escape attempts, instead focusing on writing his memoirs and giving occasional interviews behind bars. But that's not the end of it. Things are about to get even more unpredictable. Taliban mass prison break 2011. On April 25, 2011, the Taliban orchestrated one of history's largest and most sophisticated prison breaks at Sarposa prison in Kandahar, Afghanistan. In a single night, nearly 500 prisoners, including approximately 100 Taliban commanders and fighters, disappeared through an underground tunnel. There's a reason why this is the most well-known terrorist group in the world. Their CIA training is next level, and their bravery clearly knows no bounds. The escape plan was a marvel of patient engineering. For more than 5 months, Taliban sympathizers rented a house about half a mile from the prison and began digging. Working mostly at night to avoid detection, they constructed a tunnel roughly 3 feet wide and 3.5 feet high, reinforced with concrete supports and equipped with electricity, air pipes for ventilation, and even lighting along its entire 1,050-foot length. The tunnel emerged precisely under the political wing of the prison where Taliban members were housed. The diggers calculated their position so accurately that they broke through the concrete floor directly within a cell block. Even more remarkably, they timed the breakthrough for when the guards changed shifts. Once inside, Taliban members who knew about the plan quietly woke fellow prisoners. For over 4 hours, inmates filed through the tunnel to freedom while prison guards remained completely unaware. By the time authorities discovered the empty cells during morning count, most escapees were long gone, having been picked up by waiting vehicles. Afghan officials were deeply embarrassed by the break. NATO forces were stunned that such a massive engineering project could happen literally under their noses. The escape suggested either incredible incompetence or widespread corruption among prison officials. The mass escape severely undermined coalition efforts in southern Afghanistan, immediately strengthening Taliban forces in the region. Many of the escaped fighters quickly rejoined the insurgency, bringing valuable intelligence about prison operations and coalition tactics. Now, it's time to talk about an escape so smart, it's terrifying. Tier 6. Escape from ADX Florence. The United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX, in Florence, Colorado, is considered America's most secure prison, often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Officials have consistently claimed that no one has ever escaped from ADX Florence since it opened in 1994. However, persistent rumors suggest that at least one serious escape attempt came terribly close to success but was deliberately kept from public knowledge. According to unverified accounts from former prison staff and inmates, the attempt allegedly occurred sometime between 2005 and 2007. The prisoner involved was reportedly a high-profile terrorist or cartel leader housed in the facility's H unit, reserved for inmates under special administrative measures. The escape plan supposedly involved an elaborate scheme that exploited a vulnerability in the prison's advanced electronic security systems. Using materials smuggled in through corrupt staff members, the inmate allegedly constructed a device that temporarily disrupted motion sensors in certain parts of the facility. The prisoner reportedly made it through multiple secure doors and nearly reached an outer service area before being discovered by chance when an off-duty guard entered an area that should have been empty. According to the rumors, the escape attempt came so close to success that it triggered a classified security review by the Bureau of Prisons and FBI. Federal officials have consistently denied that any such attempt ever happened. Security experts point out that ADX Florence's design makes such an escape nearly impossible. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement in cells constructed with poured concrete and reinforced steel with minimal human contact. Whether this attempted escape is fact or fiction remains uncertain. Some security analysts suggest that even if true, the government might reasonably classify such information to prevent others from learning about potential vulnerabilities in what's supposed to be America's most escape-proof prison. And now for the final act. Unit 731 Scientist Escape, 1945. As World War II ended in 1945, Dr. Shiro Ishii faced a grim future. As the commander of Japan's notorious Unit 731, a biological warfare research facility in occupied China, he was responsible for horrific human experimentation that killed thousands of prisoners. If captured by Allied forces, he would almost certainly face execution as a war criminal. But Dr. Ishii never stood trial. According to historical accounts, he orchestrated one of history's most consequential prison escapes by faking his own death and negotiating immunity with American forces. As Soviet forces advanced into Manchuria, Ishii ordered the destruction of 731's facilities and had subordinates spread word that he had died of typhus. He then went into hiding in rural Japan under a false identity. Meanwhile, American intelligence officials learned about Unit 731's extensive research on biological weapons and became interested in acquiring this data. What followed was essentially a deal with the devil. Ishii reached out to American authorities through intermediaries, offering complete access to 731's research data in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The Americans, concerned about Soviet advances in biological weapons and eager to gain an advantage in the emerging Cold War, allegedly accepted. While many of his subordinates were tried and executed by Soviet authorities, Ishii was never prosecuted. He reportedly lived in Japan under US protection until his actual death from throat cancer in 1959. Some researchers believe he may have traveled to the United States to directly assist with American biological weapons programs, though definitive evidence remains elusive. The story of Ishii's escape from justice represents one of the most controversial examples of how valuable scientific knowledge, even when obtained through horrific means, sometimes shields perpetrators from accountability for their crimes. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and watch our last video, The Great People Who Weren't Great People Iceberg.